Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you very much. June, the month of gay Christmas, where all of your local LGBTs take to the streets and celebrate what makes us us.
Hot girl summer, so you know she got it.
There's some really interesting discussions that happen in the larger LGBT community, and of course I always love drama, so when I saw this conversation happening, I knew I had to throw myself in. No, not that conversation. I've been attending Pride events for, years at this point, and there's always been something really powerful about that huge outflowing of love and support that you feel from the larger community when you go. In a lot of places, Pride has become something of a celebration, a victory of everything that we've accomplished so far and how far we've managed to come in the fight for LGBT equality. And it's also a great time for us to reassert our support for the entire community and talk about all of the different ways in which we'll continue to fight for equal rights moving forward. There's also something really indescribably powerful about watching a city you know just totally light up for an entire weekend. I mean, you're talking flags in every storefront and streets filled with people. Even just trying to leave at the end of the night when the streets are packed bumper to bumper with cars of people trying to get out of there. It reminds me that we're here. We've always been here. And it shows just how powerful we can be when we all stand together. But more and more often, there's something else that you see at Pride. In the parades, on the stages, selling the overpriced beers in the park. Rainbow corporations. What a interesting new problem we found ourselves with. On one hand, it is a good thing that support for LGBT causes has become so popular in the last few years. I mean, we didn't even have legal gay marriage until 2015 in the United States, and now just about any company in the world will slap a logo on their package in hopes of getting those sweet, sweet gay dollars. On the other hand, it certainly feels like a lot of these companies want the credit for being LGBT allies without actually doing any allyship. There are some companies that are even engaged in actively harmful practices, not just for their employees, but by funding anti-gay and anti-trans agendas. Just look at Coca-Cola. Every year, Coke brands itself as an advocate for LGBT rights, but they and a handful of other very large and powerful corporations have, as of 2020, continued to donate to anti-LGBT politicians and causes. Now, in Coke's defense, they did in 2020 update their political contributions policies to include searches for equality and inclusion when they're considering who to give donations to. Which would be great if that didn't mean that every year before that they have branded themselves as a pro-LGBT company while at the same time continuing to give donations to anti-gay and anti-trans politicians. But better late than never, I guess. Or is it? Let's talk about it. I personally don't think it's fair to say that all corporations are only disingenuously pandering to queer audiences to try to get money from them. There are plenty of places that have offered protections to LGBT people before they were required to by law. In some instances, these businesses are almost entirely funded by a LGBT consumer base. I don't think anyone is saying that it's disingenuous corporate pandering for the local gay bar to hand out beads during Pride Month. But that's the thing. Pride isn't an exclusively queer event anymore. We've seen Pride grow from protests with attendance in the hundreds to month-long events with attendance in the millions. And no company is required to be there, but Just about any capitalist could look at a crowd that size and say, hey, you could make a lot of money here. So the question for a lot of these companies becomes, is it better to support LGBT causes at the risk of alienating a conservative consumer base? Or are you better staying quiet and allowing that conservative consumer base to continue purchasing your products uninterrupted? I mean, if we've seen anything from the trans panic bills that have been popping up all over the country this year, it's that LGBT rights still has a long way to go, and there's still a lot of opposition that we have to work through. Some companies have realized that you can put on a shiny veneer of allyship and progressivism when it's expected without having to actually change anything. And this works out great because not only can you continue to sell your products to conservatives, but you can also get that sweet gay money too. You'll always lose some amount of customers for making your logo rainbow on Twitter, but doing this means you've essentially doubled your consumer base, and all you had to do was slap some rainbows on a pair of ears.
After all these years, finally, we have them all.
And hey, I don't want to spend all day making fun of the Disney gays. So let's talk about another corporation that's become a pretty frequent fixture at pride parades all over the country. Raytheon, the weapons manufacturer. Maybe there is no better way to describe the problems with pride in America today than by telling you that they feature a weapons manufacturer who recently made billions of dollars from the Saudi government for missile sales. But don't worry, they received a 100% inclusivity score and are apparently a wonderful place to work if you're an LGBT American. Now, if you're an LGBT person living in Yemen, you might disagree, but I'm sure you'll be... It's not fine. All of this goes on to serve this growing dichotomy between a movement that's very concerned with progressive ideals and with finding equal rights for all individuals, and one that makes money for large corporations. At a certain point, you have to ask, is this really what historical and current queer activists have been fighting for? A big gay rights missile? It's probably the only one you couldn't sell to Saudi Arabia. Corporations are not going to stop making their Twitter handles rainbow for the month of June. At least, not while there's money to be made from it. And it is good that these companies publicly support LGBT rights. After all, there are plenty more companies that are more than happy to bank off of homophobia to increase their sales. At the same time, though, I don't think companies that publicly support gay people and then quietly fund anti-LGBT legislation have any place at Pride. The only reason that Pride has become a big profitable event is because of us. Queer people and activists who have been fighting for centuries to gain LGBT rights and acceptance in not just this country, but all over the world. And companies don't get to show up 50 years late and then claim all of the credit. Honestly though, if you're looking for a pride that isn't entirely overrun by corporate pandering, then you might be a little bit closer than you think. A city that I used to live in had its first ever Pride Parade in 2018. And I guarantee you that whatever local queer activist group that you've got near you would appreciate your attendance. In conclusion, enjoy Pride. Or at least however much of it is left by the time this video comes out. I place all of the blame on Banana Republic and the stuff that they were supposed to send me a month ago that still hasn't shown up. I've also got a Patreon now. If you choose to support me, not only do you get my undying love and gratitude, but you also receive all of my videos a day early, and you'll get your name mentioned at the end of every video. with all of that out of the way, all I've got left to say is queer rights, and that I look forward to the day when we take over the nation's water supply and the new age can truly begin. Let the Globo-Hobo agenda rise!
Your kids will start converting you.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
Transgenders to use any public bathrooms at your state capitol or in your legislature. Does your state allow public schools to push the homosexual agenda? Does your state allow public school transgender bathrooms? We're gonna
Sex with no emotional connection, and guess what?
I would leave the
It feels
question
good.
of marriage to the
And this
states.
is
I
why
would
you
leave the
have a
question of
hypersexualized
adoption to the
community.
states. That's the way it's been for 2 centuries of our nation's history until
We'll convert your children and make an ally.